Lorraine Ballard Morrow. We're going to talk about the reaction to the Supreme Court's decision on DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, with guest host Angela Giampolo of Giampolo Law Group and a blogger at phillygaylawyer.com.
We have Pennsylvania Senator Daylin Leach here with us today, who's represented the 17th Senatorial District now for 4 years.
We're over 5 now.
Over 5.
Over 5. Second term, and then House before that.
Okay. And Temple alum?
Absolutely.
Big T travels far and wide.
Could have gone anywhere. Right. Chose Temple.
Most importantly, you are running for Congress.
Indeed. 13th Congressional District, Allison Schwartz's old seat as she moves on to other things. And it's a Philadelphia, Montgomery County-based district. If you want to see something that's drawn really strangely, take a look at the borders of that.
Okay. What does it look like?
It's like a backward E that's really, really jagged.
Now, when we had planned on doing this today, we had no idea that today was going to be this momentous day where the Supreme Court comes down with these 2 Supreme Court decisions on gay marriage. You and I have talked about this before. You've been a champion on gay rights back when it wasn't trendy, to say the least. That's
true. To me, this was an issue of fundamental human rights from a very young age. Frankly, marriage was not on my radar screen when I first got involved in politics. It seemed such an impossible dream back in the 80s and 90s, before states like Hawaii and Iowa started having some interesting court decisions. But as soon as this did become part of the national consciousness, I knew that this was a fight I wanted to be part of, because the civil rights movement for African Americans and the suffragette movement for women before that, and all of the fights that immigrants and various ethnicities have had to wage over the years, I knew this was a fundamental civil rights issue, probably the fundamental civil rights issue of our time. And if you're in a position to do something about it, how can you not want to be part of that?
Right. What kind of pushback did you get?
Well, I introduced the marriage equality bill, the only one that's ever been introduced in Pennsylvania. I did it a number of years ago, again, when it was polling in like the 20s, before it was cool. And I can tell you, I received a lot of email from across the state. My district is actually pretty good. I have a suburban district. There was some pushback and a couple of weird encounters I had. I used to go to this lunch club once a month of a bunch of folks in my area. Well, the head of it disinvited me. I was shunned and taken off the lunch club list because I supported marriage equality. But generally speaking, my district was fine, but I would get emails around the state that were just breathtaking in their hostility and in their anger and in their confusion. They didn't understand the issue. Apparently, my afterlife is not looking promising. I got that quite frequently, and to which I always replied that that was the case before. This is way before, predates me introducing this bill. It was interesting. However, I have found that over time, except for a very small segment of the population, which still retains sort of a vociferous dislike of equality in this respect, I have found that even people who oppose this are much more muted. There's sort of a resignation around a lot of people, like, well, it's going to happen. They may not like it, but I think people are coming to grips with it. And I think it's the same thing we saw when African Americans received, when we signed the Civil Rights Bill of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65, which of course was gutted yesterday by the Supreme Court. Another issue. But for a long time, we saw these laws actually change attitudes. No one would think in the 50s of an African American walking into a diner in Mississippi and ordering lunch. That was unheard of. Now, it's unheard of that anyone would complain about it. Every once in a while, you have some crazy situation, and it makes national news. Changes in laws change attitudes over time. And so I think that the response has been becoming more promising. These decisions will only accelerate that process.
And what about on collegial level, meaning your colleagues that you go to work with every day? You've seen a change in your constituents, but what about the makeup of the Senate?
Well, one thing that people should understand is that politicians are interesting. They do not seek out controversy, typically, and they're more timid, I think, than they need to be or that they should be on many issues. And I'm not saying I'm a saint in that regard, but I think timid is not a word people would attach to me. So a lot of my colleagues, even then, came up to me and said, of course, you're right. I mean, what do I care if 2 gay people want to get married? But obviously I can't vote that way, or obviously I can't publicly say that. I had one senator say to me, my constituents are crazy. And so there are people who are concerned from certain parts of the state, and frankly, from certain parts of the state, they may have a legitimate concern politically. Others are afraid to do it, even though they would face no risk of losing an election. They just don't want the controversy. Frankly, I think that's unfortunate. And I think now that we have polling which shows a clear majority of Pennsylvanians support equality. We have these Supreme Court decisions. We now have 38 more million people living under a regime of equality in America after the Prop 8 decision today. There's really no excuse not to co-sponsor this legislation. We only have 5 co-sponsors. We should have, I think, every Democrat as a co-sponsor. And I think there's a lot of Republicans who should be co-sponsors of this. And I'm hoping that that starts to happen. That's one of the things we're talking about. I'm chair of the LGBT caucus, and we're going to start really putting pressure on people to, I hate to use a metaphor here, but come out of the closet on supporting marriage equality. Because frankly, it's not that dangerous a place to be anymore. And there's no excuse.
But I think to your point, now that the Supreme Court decisions have come down, that's almost forgiveness, if you will, or gives these other legislatures the right or the ability to come down in favor of gay marriage now. To your point, if a government discriminates against a group of people, then obviously the people in that country will think it's okay to discriminate against that group as well. And so now with the repeal of DOMA, now it's not okay to discriminate. So now people within the United States, and hopefully as well our legislature, will follow suit.
Well, I issued a statement today after the decision, and I sort of threw down a little bit with my colleagues. I said, we have a fundamental decision to make in Pennsylvania. The Supreme Court said that there is no legitimate justification for treating gay and lesbian couples different than straight couples. And so are we going to embrace equality and walk, as Hubert Humphrey said, into the bright sunshine of human rights? Or are we going to be joining states like Mississippi and Alabama in fighting a sad and lonesome dead-ender battle in favor of bigotry and fear? We have to make that decision. That time has come to make that decision. And I'm hoping Pennsylvania, the birthplace of democracy, will make the choice to embrace equality and take, at least from this point forward, a leadership role rather than kicking and screaming towards equality. It is not befitting our great state to behave that way.
Now, ultimately, you're running for Congress, as we talked about. And so in terms of next steps, because we didn't get the sweeping ruling that we were hoping for, but there's still work to do on a state level with which we could get federal help in doing. So if elected, how else would you continue the championing of LGBT rights, but now at the federal level?
Well, a gay married couple will now get all the benefits and rights in federal law. However, they will still be denied those rights and benefits in states that do not recognize their marriage, even if they were married legally in a state that did. So I think one of the things we need to do is pass legislation at the federal level, reiterating that legal marriages shall be given full faith and credit in all states, whether it's gay and couples or whether it's couples who maybe you have to be 19 to get married in one state, but you have to be 18 to get married in another state. Well, even the state that you have to be 19 should recognize the other state's 18-year-old marriage, which historically they have done. But full faith and credit should be given to these marriages. We can't have a situation where people are legally married under state and federal law in one state, but not in another. That's just unacceptable, and I think that should be the first step.
Absolutely. And so you have a big deadline coming up, June 30th.
Yeah.
What can people do who support you, like I do, for Congress to help you in any way?
Well, they can take a second mortgage out. We have a realtor who can help. But no, we could desperately use contributions because we're trying to make our first quarterly report is the big report that everyone looks at to see who's taking the race seriously. We've been working very hard. We're going to release a very big number, but we could really use some help to make it even bigger. Go to www.votedaylin, vote my name, D as in dog, AYLIN, votedaylin.com. You can watch a little video about me over and over and over again if you want, and you can hit the big red button and all your problems will be solved, but we can use your help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for everything that you do now at the state level and hopefully in Congress.
Thank you, Angela.
This is Angela Giampolo of Giampolo Law Group, and if you want to find out more about what I'm doing, go to my blog, phillygaylawyer.com.